You're minding your own business, living your best life, when suddenly, your HOA Karen neighbor decides to make your life a living hell. She threatens to evict you over a minor infraction, but instead of backing down, you do something wild, something no one saw coming. You buy the house next door and turn it into a full-blown nightclub. Neon lights, loud music, and a never-ending party right next to her. What happens next? Chaos, drama, and a lot of surprises. Stick around. It's a story you're not going to want to miss. And if you enjoy this wild ride, be sure to click subscribe, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. I had always been content with my life in the quiet suburban neighborhood. It was the kind of place where you could relax, sip coffee on the porch, and enjoy the peace. My home was cozy, just the way I liked it, nothing fancy, but comfortable. I had a routine, one I looked forward to every day. Life was simple, and that's how I liked it. But then came Karen. Karen was the kind of neighbor who took herself a little too seriously. She was the self-appointed queen of the HOA, and she loved to remind everyone of it. If you didn't follow the rules to her exacting standards, you'd hear about it. Loud music, reported. A garden gnome in the wrong spot, reported. She even once reported someone for having a red front door instead of the approved earthy tones. Nothing escaped her watchful eye. One afternoon, I was having a small gathering in my backyard. Nothing crazy, just a few friends, some music, and a barbecue. We kept it pretty low-key, but apparently, that wasn't good enough for Karen. I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, there she was, standing with her arms crossed, her face twisted in disapproval. "You're going to have to shut this down," she said, pointing her finger at me like I was a child who'd broken some unspoken rule. "I've already received complaints about the noise, and the HOA doesn't tolerate this kind of behavior. If you don't fix this immediately, you'll be facing fines, maybe even eviction." I stood there, stunned. Eviction, over a small backyard gathering. I tried to explain that we weren't being loud or disruptive, but she wasn't having any of it. She'd made up her mind, and the HOA would back her, no matter what. She was a board member, and to her, that meant she could wield power however she saw fit. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Who did she think she was, trying to ruin my peaceful life over something so small? The idea of backing down and quietly complying wasn't sitting well with me. If she wanted a fight, I was more than ready to give it to her. I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. Instead of just rolling over and paying fines, I decided to get creative. If she thought she could take away my peace and fun, I'd find a way to make her life just as chaotic. I wasn't going to give her what she wanted. In fact, I was going to show her exactly what it felt like to have your world turned upside down, and I had the perfect idea to do it. One afternoon, as I was sipping coffee on my porch, I noticed a for sale sign on the house next door. At first, I thought it was just another house that had been on the market for months. But when I took a closer look, I realized it was something different. The house was old, run down, and had seen better days. But despite its condition, there was potential. It was bigger than mine, with a spacious backyard and a location that couldn't be beaten. A light bulb went off in my head, and suddenly, I had an idea, crazy, outrageous idea, that could give Karen exactly what she deserved. What if I turned that house into a nightclub? The thought made me smile. I could just imagine it. Neon lights, music blasting through the speakers, people coming and going all night long, and Karen standing there, helpless, watching her quiet suburban world unravel. It was perfect. A never-ending party, right next to her, every single night. I immediately called up a few of my closest friends to share my plan. I was half expecting them to laugh it off or talk me out of it, but to my surprise, they were all in. At first, they were skeptical. "Are you sure about this? A nightclub? Right next door to her?" one of them asked. But as I laid out the details and described the chaos we could create, they were hooked. "We can help with the setup," one friend offered. "Maybe even pitch in financially. We'll turn that place into something wild." That's all I needed to hear. We were going to do this. We began brainstorming ideas for the club: neon lights, a DJ booth, a bar, and even a pool area for VIPs. It was going to be everything Karen hated: loud, chaotic, and completely unpredictable. The next step was the house. I didn't have a ton of money saved up, but I was determined to make this work. I put together a plan to buy the house, using a mix of savings, a small loan, and some creative financial help from friends. It wasn't easy, but I made it happen. I closed the deal, and just like that, I owned the house next door. The real fun was about to begin. We wasted no time getting started. We started tearing down walls, putting in soundproofing, and turning the place into the most outrageous nightclub the neighborhood had ever seen. The first time I stood in that empty house, looking at the space I was about to transform, I couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. This was going to be good, really good. Now, all I had to do was sit back and wait for Karen's reaction. I couldn't wait to see the look on her face when the music started and the lights began flashing. It was going to be a show, and she was going to be front and center. The moment I stepped inside the house, I could feel the energy building. The walls were bare, the floors dusty, and the space felt lifeless. But that was all about to change. My friends and I rolled up our sleeves and got to work. The transformation was nothing short of a miracle. We ripped out old fixtures, installed a top-of-the-line sound system, and put in bright neon lights that would make any nightclub jealous. A DJ booth went in the corner, complete with flashing lights, and a fog machine that added a touch of mystery. The bar was set up along the back wall, stocked with everything you could want for a wild night. For that extra flair, we even put in a small pool area with a few lounge chairs. It was everything a high-energy nightclub should be, and I was proud of how it was all coming together. As the finishing touches were added, I could barely contain my excitement. It was time for the grand opening, and I wasn't about to hold back. I posted on social media, invited everyone I knew, and even put out a few flyers to get the word out. The night of the event arrived, and it was nothing short of spectacular. The lights flashed in every direction, the music was pumping, and the crowd was buzzing with energy. DJ sets, drinks flowing freely, and people dancing under neon lights. It was a party like no other, and it felt amazing to see it all come to life. But it didn't take long for the noise to catch the attention of the neighborhood, and it wasn't long before Karen noticed. I could hear her car screeching to a halt outside my house, and soon enough, she was storming up my driveway. Her face was bright red, her hands clenched into fists, and her eyes were narrowed in pure anger. Without a word, she marched up to the door, knocking loudly. I opened it, and she wasted no time with pleasantries. "This has got to stop," she shouted, her voice high-pitched with rage. "I will not stand for this. This is a quiet neighborhood, and you've turned it into a nightclub. I demand you shut this down immediately." Her outburst was exactly what I'd been waiting for. Instead of backing down or trying to calm her down, I smiled and welcomed her into the chaos. "Karen, you're just in time for a tour," I said, motioning for her to come inside. Her face twisted even more with fury, but there was nothing she could do. I took her through the club, showing off the flashing lights, the DJ booth, and the crowds enjoying the night. She was fuming, but what could she do? The party was already in full swing, and nothing was going to stop it. The more upset she got, the more it felt like a victory. My nightclub was becoming the talk of the town, and Karen couldn't do a thing about it. The chaos was only just beginning, and I was ready to watch her try and control it. Karen wasn't going to give up without a fight. Her first move was to call the cops, but when they arrived, they found nothing wrong. We weren't breaking any laws, and the noise level was within the legal limits. That didn't stop her though. Karen wasn't one to be easily discouraged. She started rallying the neighbors, convincing them that our club was the downfall of the neighborhood, the end of peace and quiet. Some of the neighbors were on her side, but most of them had already warmed up to the idea of having a place to go outright in their own backyard. Even the local businesses were benefiting from the increased traffic. People were grabbing food from nearby restaurants and stopping by for drinks. Karen's frustration reached a boiling point. She began making calls to the HOA board, demanding that they intervene. She threatened to have my club shut down for violating neighborhood codes, even though the house itself was legally zoned for residential use. She was out for blood, and it didn't matter how many people were enjoying themselves. It was her mission to destroy everything I'd built, but I wasn't about to let her win. I called up my lawyer and we went to work. We found a loophole in the HOA's bylaws, something they'd missed when drafting the rules. There was nothing in their regulations that said a residential property couldn't host private events, especially if it didn't interfere with the peace and safety of the neighborhood. We fought back hard, and when Karen's lawyer tried to bring up noise complaints, we proved that the volume was within acceptable limits. It was a legal battle, but I was ready for it. Meanwhile, the club was growing in popularity. What started as a simple neighborhood party had turned into a hotspot. People from all over town were showing up, eager to check out the new nightclub that had popped up out of nowhere. The music was pumping every weekend, and soon it became the place to be. Word spread fast on social media, and the place was packed every Friday and Saturday night. Even some of the neighbors who had been on Karen's side began to see the appeal, showing up with friends and letting loose. But for Karen, things were only getting worse. Her obsession with shutting down my nightclub started to consume her. She would rant about it to anyone who would listen, complaining about the ruin I had brought to the neighborhood. She tried to organize petitions, but the support just wasn't there. Every time she came by, her face was more red, her demeanor more bitter. It was clear that the constant battle was eating away at her, and I could see her unraveling in front of my eyes. Her life had become a mission to destroy something that everyone else was enjoying, and the more she fought, the more the club thrived. The tide had turned, and she couldn't stop it. The HOA had finally called for one last meeting to settle the fate of the nightclub. It was the final battle, and Karen had pulled out all the stops. She'd been pushing for months to have the club shut down, calling in lawyers, gathering complaints, and rallying a few neighbors who were still on her side. She thought this meeting would be her victory, the moment when she'd finally rid the neighborhood of the chaos I had created. But what she didn't know was that this was the moment I'd been waiting for. The night of the meeting, I walked into the HOA's usual meeting room with a confident stride. Karen was already there, her arms crossed, looking like she was ready to pounce. But I wasn't worried. I had something she didn't, a stack of evidence that would turn the tide in my favor. I had gathered testimonies from neighbors who had embraced the nightclub, local businesses that had benefited from the influx of visitors, and even data showing how the neighborhood's property values had gone up. I had video footage of peaceful nights, controlled noise, and happy guests enjoying themselves without disturbing anyone. The evidence was clear. The nightclub wasn't just some loud nuisance. It was an asset to the community. Karen, on the other hand, was struggling. She had nothing but angry complaints and a few exaggerated stories about wild parties. It was clear her hold on the board was slipping. The more I presented, the more the HOA members began to shift in their seats, realizing they couldn't keep pushing for a shutdown without backing it up with something solid. The tables had turned, and Karen could feel it. As the meeting went on, it became more and more obvious that her power was fading. The board members began to question her. Why were we being targeted when the club had become a hotspot, attracting attention from people outside the neighborhood? They couldn't ignore the positive changes anymore, and with each passing minute, Karen's grip on the situation weakened. In the end, It was a victory for me. The HOA officially backed down. They couldn't justify evicting me or shutting down my business. The nightclub was here to stay. Karen, once the powerful leader of the HOA, sat there, stunned, humiliated in front of everyone. I could see the anger on her face as she realized that, despite everything she'd done, she had lost. As for me, I walked out of that meeting with a sense of satisfaction I'd never felt before. The neighborhood began to accept the vibrant energy the club brought, and even some of the neighbors who'd once been on Karen's side started showing up, enjoying the lively atmosphere. Karen, meanwhile, disappeared from the HOA scene. She couldn't handle the loss, and over time, she faded into the background. As for me, I kept running my nightclub, knowing that I'd turned what had started as a nightmare into a victory. Every weekend, the place was packed, and I could feel the rush of having one. It wasn't just about the club anymore, it was about proving that sometimes, the best way to win is to fight back with a little creativity